Good morning and welcome to the Workforce Observer. We are so pleased to have with us today Lydia Wilson, the Chief People Officer at Dexian IT Solutions. Lydia is a staffing industry executive with varied experience across different sectors and very passionate about changing the way the world works. Welcome, Lydia. I'm really excited.
Oh, I'm excited too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, same here. And one of the things, which I have been thinking about ever since you moved to Dexian, but it wasn't Dexian then, but since you moved, was your career shift. You
Yeah.
went from selling at Pontoon, right? A
Yeah.
deco
Yeah.
to becoming Chief People Officer at Dexian. So what inspired this? And I mean, if you had to talk about your journey a little bit and the two biggest lessons you've taken from all of
Yeah.
this.
It's funny. I started like a lot of people start, right? It was a job in my career. I did not plan on being in the staffing industry. And I started as a recruiter, got quickly into sales, got quickly from sales, kind of small local sales to large account sales to enterprise global sales. And then the trajectory was into a leadership role. So I spent a long time in that area. But then what happened was with the merger of Signature and Dices, which are now Dexian, the conversation started to happen about how do you build a business? How do you build $1 billion company? How do you do this combining two cultures together? So the opportunity came up, and for me to look at leadership first and leadership development, helping to look at the business side of it. And the truth was that it was a longer conversation, and then that conversation turned into, we don't even have the role of chief people officer, but we're looking at learning and development, culture, business. How do we tie all that together? And we had this conversation about chief people officer, which is kind of a funny title on the one hand, and then it's kind of I love the title on the other. But really, I chose to do it, and I chose to make that transition because I could not only impact the company, but I could impact people's lives and have a different trajectory, help support the trajectory of the company as well as the trajectory of people individually. So that was why I did it. The As far as the company's concerned, Dexian's business model takes students right out of college and takes them through a comprehensive training and development journey. So they go through 13 weeks, then using mentors, then going back to a program, working with their managers, and learning our culture as well as a craft of recruiting and sales. So that was just exciting to me. The idea of being part of that, and that I had that knowledge, I had done that myself, and then helping to create that culture. But there was really nothing. It just was kind of exciting for me at this stage of my life to be able to go, you know what, I can take all this business side, I can apply it here, and then we can help kind of develop and shape the trajectory of the organization. So that was why.
Very cool. So, if you had to share any lessons, before we talk about actually what is your role, define your role, before we
Yeah.
get into that, let's just, any lessons you have. I think you're very valuable and we don't need to spend too long on them, but it'd be just nice to know.
You mean lessons learned as far as when I transitioned into the role, like shifting into the role?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Because
the
I,
the
I personally think of sales and then
yeah,
people,
yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe it's not true. So,
Well, no, it's interesting that you asked me that because one of the things that I've found this a couple of times in my career, in the second half of my career, is that I switched from kind of pure staffing into RPO, recruitment process outsourcing side, and then into MSPs. And when I made that transition to run and lead sales and development for the RPO division within Adecco, at the time it was Adecco Solutions, and then to Pontoon, I didn't know anything about it. I absolutely knew zero. So I went from one of the more educated people in the room to somebody that absolutely knew nothing. So that was really an interesting point in my career, and I actually found that I loved it. I loved the learning. I loved the curiosity. I loved that stage, and I love learning from others. But it was a steep learning curve. A really steep learning curve. So I went from RPO, then I went to MSPs, and then learning that and learning VMSs and learning that whole component. And then, so when this transition came, I was already comfortable with the fact that that was the business side of it. I had learned the sales side of it. I understood the business. And I knew how important people were to the business, and I knew how important relationships were to the business. So what I learned is that you can change your trajectory at any point in time. And well, look at some of the stuff you're doing, right? It's that same thing, right? You look at it and you say, you know what? I understand business, I understand people, I have business acumen, I understand all those components. And now I understand that. Now I have to use a team and experts and people around me who actually understand the pieces of the business. For sure. I mean, that's what I've spent. I have a remarkable HR team around me right now because they've spent their careers in HR. I didn't spend my career in HR. So I lean heavily on that team while I drive strategy and we look at, how we're building and what we're doing, but the nuances of it. No, so the learning was more about I can take the skills that I have and I can apply them in a totally different field within the same industry. And I was confident and comfortable to do it.
As Chief People Officer, how do you define this and what does success in this position look like to you?
Yeah. So that was an interesting transition, right? To come in, and one, the role did not exist before I took it. And currently, what it includes within the organization is that I have HR, but I also have learning and development, and I also have leadership development. So I have those three components. I'm also responsible. Well, everybody's responsible for culture, but there's a component and a large piece of that I'm also responsible for. When you look at that and you tie that all in together, but at its purest sense, what success looks like is that our people actually can realize and be the best version of themselves while they're at work. So in this very pure sense, that's what it looks like. Now, underneath all that, right, there's this idea of learning skills, creating skills, having leaders that have the right characteristics and qualities to be able to lead teams, being able to get people to develop confidence, have a work ethic, tie all of that, right, into business goals, sales goals, development of our accounts, development of our relationships, having, strong client experience, consultant experience, and then our employee experience. So all of that, right, it's marrying those things together, that sense of self, that sense of belonging, as well as the drive to produce. So I've been in a unique position to be able to do that because I came up on the business and the sales side of it. So when I'm part of the conversation, my conversation isn't always about, transactional or function or the people side of it. It's marrying the people side of it and the development of people so they're able to produce the results. And more importantly, really live the lives they want to live. Right? We feel really strongly about bringing people into the organization and, allowing them to have a sense of purpose, develop that sense of purpose, find their voice, work within that. But it's hard when you're coming straight out of college, and we've got people at all different. I think currently we have 5 generations in the workforce, and they're all at different phases in their life. They all want different things in their life, but success for me in this role really looks at being able to get success on the personal and professional level as the individual, which turns into success from a company perspective, that we're able to produce and grow our results. So it's marrying, at its simplest form, it's marrying those two things. And I wish it was as simple to create it and do it as it is to say it. But there was a lot of time looking at that and looking at, how do we include people? How do we bring people into the organization? What values do we look for? That was an important part, a really important part of building out the role, and then moving on with the plan over the next 3 to 5 years.
It's challenging, I'm sure. So what do you see as your 2 biggest challenges? Because, all of this, I'm a content person, right? Sounds great.
Yeah.
But it's challenging to actually put into practice and get results.
Yeah. Interestingly, there's a couple things in regards to that. So what I've found really interesting is how do we balance what's good for an individual while simultaneously good for the whole, right? Because we all, as people, we work off of what's good for us, right? What's good for me, what's good for me personally, as my comp, as my career, as a person. So we're always looking to balance that side of it. But then at the same time, really, what our biggest challenge is and will continue to be is identifying our next leaders, making sure our leaders are trained and developed, making sure that our leaders that exist today are exhibiting the characteristics that we look for in the organization. That they can give strong and honest feedback, right? That they understand what emotional intelligence is, that they understand the importance of vulnerability, that all of those components make for a better work environment, for a better human, and then in turn they turn into better results for the company. We have certainly learned that over time. When we put the two organizations together, we were right, like the revenue for the both of the organizations was similar in size, and we were somewhere around 800 million in revenue within 24 months. Now think about this. Two organizations took 20 years, 24, 25 years to get to 400 million. When we put the two organizations together, we realized another 400 million in 18 to 24 months. So that was fascinating, right? And then we made this commitment to a learning and development culture. We made a commitment to our people. We made a commitment to people, business, finance, and how that runs. So, but we feel really strongly that, and for sure, for me, with the things that I have, the two biggest challenges, right, are balancing what's right for individuals in relation to the whole, and then creating our next leaders, identifying and developing our next team of leaders, as well as our existing leaders. So we feel pretty strongly that the key for most of what we do is around the leadership that we have and the development of the leadership that we have.
Yeah, sure. I get it. Leadership training is critical for high performing teams. So what initiatives do you have in place? And I know we've talked about this in casual conversations, that you do have stuff for non-executives as well, right? It's not just So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, you may need to slow me down on this, because this is a topic that I could talk for days. But so
that's good.
What we did when we looked at the organization as a whole, we did a lot of research around if we are going to be a learning and development company, what does that look like? Right? What does that look like as far as what we offer our people, what we offer people at all different levels, the career path that people have, and not only the career path that people have professionally, but what are we doing to enhance them personally? So we took a look at that, and it was staggering, actually. We found that less than, I think it's the numbers vary, right? Because people don't have exact numbers on this, but overall, it's less than 20% of the companies, large companies, have any kind of development program for non-executives, right? They have external resources, they have management training programs, but they have no leadership. They don't have any leadership. It's actually less than 5% have programs for leadership and leadership development that are for people in director, VP, executive level of positions. So we took a look at that, and we said, if we're going to be really true to creating an environment where people can be the best version of themselves, and we take them out of colleges and universities, what's the path that we put them on? So to your point, we did create an emerging leaders program, and it's a 6-month program. It's very extensive. People have to they have to apply within the organization.
Oh, wow.
They have to get their peers, recommendation from their peers. They have to get recommendation from their manager. And then we put them through an extensive development program, and it's around leadership. It's around leadership skills. It's around emotional intelligence. It's around feedback. It's around learning to have difficult conversations. It's about understanding your own strengths and your blind spots, understanding how emotion plays a role in whatever you do. So we have that. We also have I should back up a little bit. We have a leadership development department. So we have certified coaches on staff, which couldn't do anything without our certified coaches. And they are not part of, a business team, sales team, anything. They are separate, and they are part of the Emerging Leaders Program. They are part of, at any given time, I'm thinking, I don't know what percentage it is anymore, but we have people in one-on-one coaching. So they will go in through our managers, our VPs, our directors, and it's not one-on-one coaching where it's a punishment. It's one-on-one coaching where it's a development. What is it? Something that as I ascend, what do I need at the next level? What is it that are things that I could benefit from? And so we have one-on-one coaching. We have team building sessions wherein, we take our people that we're working with, not only in the one-on-one coaching, but we'll take their whole teams. And we spend time looking at the dynamic of your team, the strengths of your team. How can how do you work better together? How do you show vulnerability together? How do you communicate together? So there is a lot of time that we spend in this area with the whole intent of building and scaling the organization, right? Because if, we understand that if we are creating an environment where people can flourish and we're developing our people along the way, and we are instilling confidence, we are instilling, stronger human skills in our people, then we know that we can start to develop teams that are stronger. We can develop results that are stronger, and we have better interactions and relationships within the company. So, yeah, that's been, and we continue to invest in it. It's a department that we continue to invest in, people we continue to invest in. And the really great part about it is we don't have enough resources for everybody who now wants, I want one-on-one coaching. For a lot of people, they didn't.
Yeah, it's very unusual, right?
Yeah.
I've
No.
never heard of, and I don't want to, make any judgments, but I haven't heard of any
No.
company,
No, I
and
get it.
especially in our industry, to
It's
spend
our
this much
industry.
time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
You see it in the consulting base, you see it in
Yes,
some fairly, right? It's there.
right, right,
And when we were
right,
doing
right.
a lot of our research and analysis, that's where we saw it. That's where we did some of our benchmarking against. But
Wow.
when we look in the industry, there's skills-based training for sure. There's management training for sure. But there isn't leadership development and there isn't team building training. They're not coaches on staff. So
Yeah,
I feel
it's pretty cool.
I feel really privileged that we've made that kind of commitment, and I really enjoy spending time in that area because people are, once you get a little bit of coaching and you start to have more self-awareness, right? You start to develop faster. You start to create a better sense of self, and you have a better sense of confidence, you have a better sense of collaboration, and that's what we're seeing. That's absolutely what we're seeing as part of this. And the same for we build alliances across all of our teams, which are ways that we are going to choose to work together. So the executive team will have an alliance, an office will have an alliance on, hey, how are we going to show up for each other? And then when things are not going well, how are we gonna behave and act towards each other? So this is all part of this leadership development process and this team building process. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of
Wow.
fun building it out. Yeah, and it's been a
Yeah,
couple years now that we've got it in place.
it
Yeah.
sounds very different and unusual. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to shift the focus a little bit to sales. And what I have seen is that sales and staffing, there's been a considerable shift
Yeah.
in how people sell.
Yeah.
Your comment on that.
Yeah.
What does it look like today? Because, I mean, that's been your life before.
No,
And even
no,
now,
it's
I'm
really,
sure,
it's
so
really
what does it
interesting.
look like to you today?
Yeah.
And what's the reason behind, I don't want to put words in your mouth, behind the shift? And are
No,
people
no,
really
you don't.
selling?
No.
Or let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. No, happy to do it. Interestingly to me, and we just, this last probably 4 or 5 months, we've revamped our sales program
Okay.
because shifts, it's different. And I think, I for sure, I think part of that is just everything we talk about in a post-COVID world, right? In a post-COVID world, selling is different, right? We've got remote, we've got hybrid, we've got full remote, we've got, the standard way of selling, right? You used to be able to get in front of somebody, have a conversation with somebody, meet them in the office, meet them, all of those things. Doesn't happen anymore, right? We've got, you got people you're selling to that aren't in an office. You've got people that you're selling to that are, procurement, right, has been involved for a long time, but procurement is now involved at kind of the mid-market and below level when it wasn't involved at
Right.
that level. You've got, you've got buyers that feel so much more pressure, right? Pressure to compete on a global scale, pressure to produce more for their company for less, right?
Well,
And
that's, yeah.
so when they're dealing with the staffing firm, right, there's a lot of conversations, right? Price is always part of the conversation, but I feel that shift has there was a there was a there was a time when it wasn't as transactional. There's a component of it that I feel is very transactional, but there's also a component of it that we have seen companies, big, small, they're just buying different. They're buying differently. And but so I say that, right? I say that, and so we are expecting more out of our salespeople, right? We're expecting them to have more information, more knowledge, be able to turn on a dime quicker, to be able to respond to things quicker. All of that is very true. But you also said to me, right, it's different, but then remarkably, there's a lot of stuff that's still the same, right? So relationships still matter, right? Top talent still matters. People still matter, right? People want, I mean, as long as I, sold, people wanted to know about innovation. They wanted to know about what was happening, what was new, what could I get, what was better, how could I compete, how could I do, all of that's still there. But I think in a data-driven world where speed and efficiency and cost become like so important, I think that puts a lot of pressure on staffing firms, a lot of pressure. And I also
Right.
think because I mean, you continue to see the climb in the percentage of contingent labor, right? Contingent
Yeah.
workforce
More and more.
continues to be a larger percentage. And it makes sense that it's a larger percentage, right? As companies need to
Right.
expand and contract, it
Right.
makes sense that you would use contingent labor to do that. But the demand on the salesperson, I think continues to be, you need to know more, you need to understand more, you need to use data, you need to, all of that. It's almost
Right.
like all of that was still in place before, but it's like on steroids, right? There seems to be a component of it where it's just it I don't want to say it's harder, it's more complex. It's just really more complex. So, and
Yeah.
that puts a lot of pressure on staffing firms, and that puts a lot of pressure on salespeople. Puts a lot of pressure on leaders.
Yeah. So are different types of people, you think, coming into sales now because of what they
You know
see
what?
or?
It's a really good question. So, yes. So there's much more, like when we're on campuses. So we have
Right.
quite a few long-term relationships with universities,
Right.
and not only when I started many, many moons ago,
Right.
no one could even tell you what a staffing company did, right? No one really understood. They didn't understand the market share that staffing firms had. They just didn't understand it. And now you go on campuses, one, sales is a career. It's a career
True.
choice. So
That's good.
you are getting students who are graduating and they have chosen to do sales, and they're much more aware about staffing. They were not aware of staffing before, and
Interesting.
it's also part of our education process to help them, because like most students, they go back and talk to their parents, and so we have a fact sheet about staffing, what it is, the
Nice.
size of it, the size of the industry, what our company does, how we sit, where we are, market share, what it looks like, our partners,
Nice.
because this becomes, it's something they didn't understand, and now they do understand. Nobody woke up and said, "I
Wow.
want to be a recruiter, I want to be in staffing," and now people are making that shift. So you're right. We are
Cool.
finding a much different, a much more aware, and a much more educated student body, when we get on campuses.
Cool. State of recruiting today and the trends shaping it. I mean, it's a big question, but in your opinion, like briefly, what is the state of recruiting, the market today? What would you say?
Yeah, strangely, I don't think we're ever going to get. I don't think any conversation I've had in the last 6 months doesn't include AI, right? Doesn't include our, and even our tenured recruiters are fearful that AI is going to take away from their roles, right? Which is interesting to me because I'm a people person, right? So this is my job. This is my way of looking at things, and I don't think that is the case. I mean, it's fascinating, right? It's absolutely fascinating. We are using AI tools. We started, gosh, it's almost 3 years ago now. We started a technology incubator. So we have, and part of that is because our founders are both engineers, have roots in that area, and we have a fairly large team that sits in India and the U.S. That works on creating and looking at tools, looking at either tools that are out there or building tools and using AI to help with our, how we are supplementing what we do. So I think, when I look at the state of recruiting, I just got back from India, and we have roughly 800 recruiters sitting in India. And they do recruitment for us within India, but they also do recruitment for us we have 13 locations outside of the US. They do recruiting for those as well as the US. And it's really interesting to me because their drive and this look about where we had an offshore recruitment center and an onshore recruitment center. We don't now. We have a recruitment community, right? We don't have offshore, onshore. We have a global recruiting team. And
Nice.
and so it's been really interesting watching that. We have 5 locations that we have teams of people in, with the largest being in Delhi and Pune. But it's interesting watching that community get bigger and stronger, and that community really like coming together as a global community, right? Doesn't matter where you sit, doesn't matter, AI, our use of social, our use of being able to sit anywhere and do anything from any seat in the world has allowed us.
Wow.
A lot of people think that, you go offshore because of financial reasons, but it's also, it's a 13 and a half hour time difference, right? You now are
Right.
recruiting 24/7, right? When you
Right.
have different teams in different markets and different places, you are able to support your clients faster. You're able to support your, consultants better by being able to recruit and do that. So the state of recruiting to me is still very strong, and I think AI and the technology is only going to enhance that. But I don't think, I'm old enough to remember when people thought Monster was going to come in and eradicate the staffing industry, right? And
Right,
so,
right.
or different, there's always something new, right? There's a different form, or LinkedIn is going to do this, right? And what I found is that miraculously everybody finds a space and we're all collaborating and working together, and you're
Together.
taking the strengths of those tools and the strengths of what those wherever you're recruiting in the world, that you're utilizing those strengths, and you're utilizing the time difference, you're utilizing the workforce. So we found it as a huge advantage. But yeah, I
All
don't know.
right,
I haven't had
great.
that conversation in the last 6 months, but it evolves. It evolves really quickly, and AI is evolving really quickly.
Okay, that's great. Looking ahead, what do you see happening? Like if you had to make a prediction for the industry, and do you
Yeah,
think what do you think companies need to do to stay relevant in this new world?
yeah. I there's so much data, right? And it's how do you utilize that data most effectively? We have, you know, the cybersecurity comes into play, right? Data comes into play. Um, you know, AI comes into play, right? So I think the staffing industry, one of the advantages the staffing industry has is that our clients our clients genuinely see us as a partner, right? And they genuinely now, where when staffing first started, right, it was a very different, how utilization was seen was very different. Now it's a part of a strategy. It's a legitimate part of a strategy. It's well entrenched, at all levels and all sectors. And so when I look at it, and I look at the future of staffing, I look at it and I think, you know, who is going to best be able to adapt AI and tools to be able to help your partner, your customer, be able to deliver to their customer more efficiently, more effectively, be able to come in. You know, you've got companies where the infusion of contingent workforce, new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing something. That's fascinating, right? With that you can bring. We've got a whole ERP business that brings in teams of people to work on projects, right? An IT solutions group that comes in and works on projects that way to elevate and have companies ascend. I think the sophistication of that will continue. The trust in that will continue. Relationships will deepen that way. And a lot of that was handled by consulting firms, right? In the past, and I think a lot of that work now is being picked up by staffing firms, right, that are doing full service and not just straight contingent labor. So, between technology, data, using that data, and being able to do those things, I think that's where I see the space going, a little bit more. I don't, every time I hear of something, and we take two steps forward and three steps back. I hear initiatives across the globe. I hear different things across the globe, but I really think that being able to bring value to your customer, right? Whatever that looks like, right? With their data, how they're using it, how they're creating their workforce, how they're being able to expand, contract a little bit more effectively. I think that's going to continue to be critical as the staffing industry evolves.
I think it's inspiring. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think it's fun. I'm super glad to still be part of it, right? I think that I,
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
agree with
yeah.
you. I think it's very fun.
It's very. Last question for you. I know we're running into time, but what about giving our audience one piece of advice or a takeaway that you think would be useful? You
So,
know.
I get the opportunity. I'm asked I'm asked this quite a bit with the leadership development stuff that we do, and a lot
Right.
of women in leadership that we do. So, you know, it's a couple of things for me. The first thing is find your voice and use it. Find out what that is for you and use it. The second is work on getting better every day. When I learned the power of self-awareness and the power of investing in myself personally and professionally and what that could mean to me, and not just in my work life, but in my life in general,
A
I
human being,
yeah,
working.
as a
Yeah,
human, as a
sure.
human, that was we're trying to help and work with our teams right now. It's starting in their 20s to think about that. I didn't start thinking about that till my 40s. So,
Yeah,
if I can help somebody start to
sure.
do that a little bit sooner, that would be great. The last couple would be just the importance of being ethical. For me, like finding your voice, being, working on getting better every day and being self-aware, but then you got to be ethical, right? You got to be truthful, you got to be fair, you got to be honest. And I know in a lot of times, like I sometimes forget to say it because it's such a given that I don't think, but I look at the world sometimes and I think, no, we gotta stay focused. We gotta stay focused on that. The last two would be work hard. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts to moving yourself ahead, to getting things done. But when you find your voice and you know what it is that you want and your purpose and all those things, it's really working hard is not it doesn't feel like working is hard as much. It just feels like you're committed to something and you're passionate about it. And the final one is really something that if I would have given myself this advice a lot earlier in my life, be kinder. As I was growing and moving and driving sales, I wasn't going to say that I was mean. I don't think I was mean, but I always think we can be kinder. I think when we work to a mutual understanding and we're aware and we're trying to do the right thing by being honest and ethical and being kind, everybody wins. There's enough business for everybody out there. There's enough in the world that's good and positive. And I just find that work environments are better, communities are better, and we're better off in general. So for me, it's those five things. That
Oh,
would be my advice.
no, this was so great. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Talk soon.